Good afternoon and welcome along to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and Lee Clark. How are you?
I'm okay, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, good to see you, mate. Good to see you. And interesting week as always at Newcastle United. The FA Cup game was disappointing. From our point of view, it would have been nice to get to a semi-final and a Wembley appearance, even if the fans couldn't get there. But Bruce set up for a defensive game the first half. Maybe try to catch him in the second half. What did you make of it?
Very much the same as what you said there. I thought, the team had been playing since the restart, had been playing with a lot of confidence, been playing well, but just at the first half, me and you had talked before the game, and we're talking about the injury situation and what was going to happen, and was it going to be square pegs and round holes. And I think that's why Steve went with the formation he did in the first half, because he didn't want to disrupt the team and didn't want to play players out of position. But we did mention that Shaw could play in that midfield role, which he did move him into in the second half, and the team was better and it was stronger. It was a bit more on the front foot. We always said it was the most difficult tie for any of the clubs. It was the toughest one. It doesn't matter whether you play Man City at home or away, because they never change how they do things. They're an outstanding team, as they showed in midweek against Liverpool. But, it was always a tough game. But the first half, I think we wasted the first half in that we were very, very negative or deep. And I understand why managers want to do that. They want to play and get Man City to play in front of you. But when you're dealing with the types of players that they have, the De Bruynes, the Silvas, the Fodens, all these top midfield players, if they're given time, they can thread anything, So I just felt they were a bit too deep in the first half. Newcastle was no threat. Whenever the ball went up the top end of the pitch, there was no support for the attackers. And when they changed the system in the second half, it was a little bit better. It was a bit more of a game, but it was always going to be tough. So for me, the first half was wasted. Especially when it's just a one-off as well, Steve. It's not the replays anymore. The game had to be finished on the night. So just go for it. I think every Newcastle fan was expecting, the one result that would have been the shock would have been a Newcastle win. So there's no pressure on Newcastle, really. They should have just went for it with it being a one-off game. But unfortunately, it wasn't. And Man City looking formidable at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, they've lost the Premier League, but they've still had a cracking season. Man City haven't they? We'll forget how good they are, and I think it just shows you when the amount of talent they've got on the bench. Their entire bench you'd have in our first team, wouldn't you?
Absolutely, every one of their bench would be in our starting 11, and that's how when you start to compare groups of players and you compare teams. That's one of the examples that you use, the examples of the strength and depth that they have to change the game. To continue, one, if they're playing well, to continue that performance, but two, if the things aren't happening in the game, you look to your bench to change. And if you've got an outstanding number of players on that bench to do that, and it's not going to weaken your team, that's a sign of a very strong squad. And that's what the likes of Liverpool, Manchester City especially have. The manager there, Pep Guardiola, he can turn around and he can bring match winners off the bench all the time. So that's how you judge squads. And when we talk about Newcastle strengthening their squad, that's what you've got to be looking to. At the moment, when Newcastle, the starting 11 and maybe 2 or 3 others look quite decent, but then after that, you're delving into untried youngsters, etc. So that that's where Newcastle have to start improving in terms of the depth of that squad.
Now, with the exception of the FA Cup game, Newcastle have just been in great form since lockdown, and the Bournemouth game midweek. I mean, I know Bournemouth are on the crest of a slump, but to go and play any team that's struggling is still it's a major task. And Newcastle were on fire, weren't they?
Yeah, listen, Steve. Any Premier League game, and it doesn't matter where the team is in the table, it doesn't matter on that form. Is a very difficult game, and especially away from home. I know there's no crowds there at the moment, but they're all difficult games. And I think, Newcastle have been done a little bit of a disservice after that performance against Bournemouth. I thought they were outstanding from start to finish. Scored some fantastic goals in the game. Could have had a few more, but the overall performance was of a high standard. And I just think that, there's been lots being said, oh, Bournemouth not playing great and down the bottom end of the table, but there's never any easy games, and you know it's the old cliche, but certainly in the Premier League, and Bournemouth have been a strong team for 4 or 5 years under Eddie's management. So that was a terrific result, and I think that's why everyone's looking forward to the next game, because certainly since the football's returned in terms of the league, with the exception of a little bit of a flat performance against Villa, the performances in the league have been really strong by Newcastle, and what they're starting to do now, which they weren't doing early part of the season, they're starting to score a high percentage of their chances as well. So, and their attacking players are looking like they're playing with lots of confidence. Almiron, St. Maxim is being outstanding and getting lots of plaudits, and rightly so. So that's a big thing. So looking forward to the next game against West Ham. Watched them through the week against Chelsea, and they caused a bit of a shock result, but previously hadn't been playing particularly well before then. So I think if Newcastle can continue, that's what they need to do. They need to continue in terms of getting consistency in their performance. If they can do that, could look forward to another impressive result.
So Maximum, I mean, we've talked a few times about Joe Linton and his lack of form and lack of goal scoring form. The pressure of the number 9 shirt, the pressure of the fee that were paid for him. But for all the criticism we're maybe given the people who brought in Joe Linton for that price, and Maximum's been outstanding, hasn't he?
Absolutely brilliant. When me, you and Rob Lee had the conversation a couple of weeks ago, and you asked one of the fans asked the question, would any of the current group force their way into the entertainer squad? And Rob was adamant that and none of them would, but I did say that St. Maxim could potentially be on the bench. But certainly since then, he's even got better and better. So I know there's been comparisons to and mentioned in the same breath as Chris Waddle and David Ginola. Yeah. I think certainly on the talent he's got, he can be mentioned. What he's just got to do is do it over a long period of time to be compared to those two who've done it over a long period of time for Newcastle and were fantastic in the left wing. But he's such an exciting player. He goes past people with such ease, both on the outside and in the inside. And what he does as well while he's dribbling, he can see a pass also. So he's not just going past people for the sake of it. He's going past people to try and make things happen. I mean, his bit of skill for Sean Longstaff's goal the other day was absolutely superb. He had them on toast, really. So he is a real exciting player. And like you say, we've criticised the recruitment department on the signing of Joe Linton, but we have to praise them on the signing of St. Maxim, because in today's market, it's not a lot of money what was paid for him. And he's proven to be one of the hits of the season. And it's just a shame that there's no fans in the stadiums to admire what he's doing, because he's such an exciting player. He's one of those players that gets the fans on the edge of their seat, because he's always going to be doing something.
He seems to have adapted to life in the Premiership, but life in the North East as well, and that's half the battle, isn't it? When you come in as a foreign player, and you sign for Newcastle, he's bought into the area and bought into the football club.
I love his humour. I don't do a lot of social media, but the bits and bobs that I do look at or I get showed, his sense of humour is fantastic. I mean, he had a little stint on the local radio station on their football phone in, and he was crazy. One of a couple of swear words in there, and I think he got everyone smiling, and which was a difficult time in the early part of the season. People enjoyed his humour, so. No, you're absolutely right. I think one of the reasons he's been so impressive, he's bought into the region as well. He's got that relationship with the fans. They obviously really like him, and they love him to bits for what he does on the field. But he has that rapport with them off the pitch as well. And I've heard stories about when they've bumped into him in supermarkets or in the city centre, and he's been terrific with the fans and that, and how he's communicated with them, the response he's had with them. I think the whole package, he's been very, very impressive. Now, the downside to that, Steve, is he's obviously going to get linked with some obviously big clubs, because he's catching the attention of everybody. And that's the big question now, is because I've got no doubt he would like to stay with Newcastle, but he'll be ambitious, and he'll want to be the club that's going to match his ambitions, because obviously if these other big clubs are coming calling for him, and that's why it's imperative that the next time the transfer window opens, or currently is when it is now, the the club start addressing and making the squad stronger. So you keep the likes of St Maxim, you don't sell them. But in terms of the current ownership, when they've had an opportunity to sell the players that have been successful, i.e. the Kabais and those type of players, they've gone and moved them on, the Sissokos, they've moved them on for the biggest bids. So that's the unfortunate issue that you have at Newcastle at this moment in time, when hopefully they can be rectified by bringing better players in, so that St Maxim and those type of players can see the ambition of the club and that they'll want to stay and be part of that.
He's obviously got a good relationship with Steve Bruce as well. I mean, whether you've seen that article in the Chronicle, I think it was today actually, just about him fining him for wearing his earrings and his headbands. It's a good thing to have that in the dressing room. You know yourself as being a manager, just the banter with the players and having a fine system and stuff like that. But it's all been taken in good humour. And as I say, he seems to have a good relationship with Steve Bruce.
Yeah, I think, listen, you've got to try and instill some discipline, but you can do it with a bit of humour. It doesn't have to be with the old metal stick and banging them over the head and doing, footballers a different breed. They have their own type of personality, but as I said, you've got to try and keep a bit of discipline, but you do it in a humorous sort of way. I used to just get the players to manage the dressing room. They had their own fine system, so they looked after one another, and there was a spell where if someone had done something quite serious in terms of indiscipline, we had what we'd done is we put together as a staff, management and players, and we bought an old yellow Robin Reliant, like off the Only Fools and Horses. So if someone had done something quite serious, they had to drive that car in that week every day into training, into the training ground. So all the rest of the squad are there in that plush cars, but then someone else is having to drive in this 30-year-old yellow Robin Reliant, So I think that put them off quite a bit. But that was doing it with a bit of humour as well. So footballers, they like the flash motors and all that. So they didn't want that type of embarrassment. That was that car that was seen in for that week. So I think that kept the discipline in place with some of our lads for that period.
Yeah, great crack, man. Great crack. The other talking point this week, obviously transfer discussions. Steve Bruce has confirmed that he's they're looking at the contracts with Danny Rose, Bentaleb, Lazaro, and of course Matty Longstaff. Lazaro's come into the frame this week, and certainly against Bournemouth made a bit of an impression. A lot of people saying maybe you could play him in one wing and play St Maxim on the other. But out of those players that are on loan, who would you like to keep, Lee?
Well, obviously, Rose comes with a pedigree. An England international, very, very experienced in the Premier League. He's one of those players, he's just a steady Eddie. He doesn't do anything over the top. He doesn't make many errors. He's what one of you call them ones, at least a 7 out of 10. And those players are worth their weight in gold. They just get on with that job and you don't have to worry about that position. I totally agree with what you said about Lazaro. I thought he was impressive against Bournemouth when he came on. He hasn't had a lot of game time, so it's been difficult to judge him. But certainly what I seen the other day, if you're talking about having, continuing with Steve's formation of the 4-2-3-1, you've got the possibilities of having the three in behind the striker, being Lazaro, St Maxim and Almiron. And you're talking about a lot of pace, a lot of technical ability, players who can go past people. And as they showed the other day, that they have good finishing skills. So certainly that would excite me. Bentaleb, I wasn't too sure about in terms of even his spell at Spurs, in terms of what he did. But I thought he was another impressive performer against Bournemouth as well, in a really outstanding team performance. So you've got to look, you've got to see where they're going to fit in. You've got to, is that the type of player we're looking to bring in to take it to the next level, or is that players of a higher quality? I think that's the big question. I think it's been a real boost since the football's come back. The form Newcastle have shown and where they've put themselves in the league, in threatening that top 10 to get in there. And if they could do that and then go and add some more quality to try and push on again next season, that would be great, really. So I would say, yeah, the three loan lads, wouldn't be bad ones to make into permanent moves. And then see what we can add also on top of that. I think we've already spoken as well, Steve, that the crucial one for me is a striker. I think if we get a quality striker, which we all know is very difficult, and you have to pay over the odds. Strikers always come with an extra premium. But if we can get a top quality striker to supplement those, especially I mentioned those three players, and the likes of Shelby and Bentaleb and Sean and Matty Longstaff, popping in with goals as well. That could be an exciting attacking threat that the team could have.
Jetro Willems is the other one, of course. His loan period's up now, and he's obviously recovering from that major injury that he suffered. But again, I think the club will monitor him, won't they? And there's still a possibility that they might make a move for him if he comes back fully fit.
Absolutely, they'll be watching carefully. Very serious injury what he got, but the thing with Jetro is, and I thought he was one of the pluses during the first half of the season, but that was when Steve was implementing the three central defenders and he was playing with wing backs, and seemed to suit Jetro Willems a lot better to be a type of wing back rather than an out and out left back, which is Steve will be looking for now. We're playing a flat back four, and I think it remains to be seen whether Jetro does fill that position in that way as an orthodox left back and just a basic flat four, rather than being that he's very, very attack minded. So that wing back role really suited him. But with Newcastle abandoning that system now, mainly for the league games, remains to be seen whether Jetro would be on their radar now, and whether they're looking at out and out left backs.
We touched on Mark Gillespie last week when we spoke, but obviously now he's signed his contract, signed a 3-year deal with the club. Rob Elliott, of course, is now left. But obviously Gillespie's coming in as cover for Dubravka and Darlow. And it's an interesting story with Gillespie, isn't he? Because he was at the club as a kid. I think his first time at the club, I think he was 8 years of age. But obviously went on to Carlisle. Didn't make it at Newcastle. Went on to Carlisle. He's taken a different route, but delighted to be back.
Listen, it's a dream come true for the lad, isn't it? He probably felt his world was crashing down when he got released as a youngster. But it just shows the kids out there that you should never give up. You should just keep going, and you work hard, and you still have the desire. He's went obviously down the leagues, went to Carlisle, and as I said, I was monitoring for a long time, and he turned in some impressive performances for them and was on my radar. Alongside another ex-Newcastle lad, Brad Potts, when I was manager at Blackpool. Couldn't get that deal done. And then he went on. He went up to Scotland, being impressive in a real impressive Motherwell team that, shocked everyone where they finished in the league and in a European place. And obviously Newcastle have seen something there in terms of bringing him back. I think the lad understands his position and his role as number 3, but once you're inside the club, he looks like he has that desire and determination to impress the manager and his staff, to fight for the place. And I think when you're a manager and you have someone like that, you have those type of players, it can only benefit you, because they're going to give everything on the training pitch to force their way into the team.
Obviously, there's no takeover yet. It's still rumbling on. It's been quite a quiet week on that front. But again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just, dotting the I's and crossing the T's before the deal's done. Richard Masters, of course, came out from the Premier League, the chief executive, and said that he was hoping that the process would finally conclude shortly. But I mean, again, we haven't got any dates or times, for that. But the club's still got to plan for next season, and I think this week sees the Premier League meet again to discuss the new season. And I think most people are expecting, the start of next season to be around about September.
Yeah, I think you have to. You can't stand still. And obviously, we have an owner, we have a chief executive, managing director, whatever you want to call them. They have to plan as if they're going to be in charge of the club. They have to keep moving the club forward. If you don't, you'll get left behind. And it's an unforgiving league, the Premier League. So, Steve will be scouring the market with his recruitment team. He'll have ideas in place. He'll probably have 2 types of lists at the moment. Lists that he's got can be realistic targets under the current regime, and potential targets that he may have if the takeover happens, if he gets a bigger budget. So and he'll be looking to move on, because, as you say, what's happening at the moment, which is unique. It's a short turnaround period in terms of finishing one season and starting the next one, and you want to hit the ground running as well in the new season. You want to have your squad settled as quickly as possible, your new signings in place as quickly as possible, and so you can attack the season straight away from the first weekend. It has been a quiet week on the takeover. I mean, I know we've talked about it and we've pleaded with the fans to be patient. I mean, I've got to say, my patience is wearing a bit thin now. It just seems to be, I've never known it. You know, I know we've had the situation with the COVID-19 and various different factors involved in the takeover. I've never known something like this take as long as I have. But on the other hand, when you see what's happened down in the Championship with Wigan Athletic, it's probably the right thing to do the due diligence as long as this, because you don't, I'm not saying anything untoward's going to happen with Newcastle, but what's happened with Wigan is absolutely atrocious. They get taken over 4 weeks ago, and then 4 weeks later they're put in administration and they're going to get relegated with that 12-point deduction after the management team have done such a terrific job to get them what looked like was safety in mid-table. So it just shows you that this, fit and proper persons test has to be done more thorough, and thankfully it looks like it is being done in the Newcastle one. But hopefully we'll have a positive outcome in terms of the takeover happening as soon as possible.
Quite a concerning thing, as you say, to see Wigan, go through this, especially after being taken over 4 weeks ago. And it just seems like the fit and proper person test. I mean, some of the things I've read, whether they're true or not, it's frightening, isn't it? When you think about the way the EFL have conducted that particular takeover, and then you look at the way that Newcastle's takeover is taking this long. It's mad, isn't it?
Absolutely, Steve. And I've had personal experience, when I was manager of Birmingham City. My owner, Carson Young, got all his assets frozen for, money laundering. So where was the fit and proper persons test when apparently bought the club. He bought it before I took over, but he paid near on £90 million for Birmingham City when it was actually only valued at about 35, 40 million at most. And so he paid more than double the price. So the alarm bells should have been actually ringing in the FA and whichever due diligence headquarters should have been ringing then. And unfortunately for me, when I took the job on July the 1st, within 2 weeks, the investigations into my owner, Carson, were concluded and were found that he'd been involved in money laundering. So all his assets got frozen. So there was no money coming into the football club. The club was in a right mess in terms of transfer embargoes, having to reduce the wage bill hugely. So I've had personal experience myself as a manager, and it's like you say, how some owners have actually got the opportunity to end up being owners of football clubs shows to me that the fit and proper person test wasn't being done diligently enough. But it looks like in Newcastle's case it is, because obviously the amount of time, surely with this amount of time, they've had the opportunity to do everything in the right way,
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm still convinced it'll happen. I know you're very confident. I don't think I've spoken to an ex-player over the lockdown period who hasn't felt that this was definitely going to happen, and it'll take time. An interesting point, Lee, and something I've never really thought of, but, if this was a normal season, you would be scratching your head a little bit thinking, do you really want to take over to happen during the season? When we're having this run and we're safe now, it's not mathematical anymore. We're safe. We're going to be in the Premier League next season. But you think, well, would you really want to take over going on during that period? Do you know what I mean? You would like it to happen in an ideal world at the end of a season, so the new owners can come in, changes can be made if they need to make them in personnel, behind the scenes or with the team or whatever you're going to do, and it just makes more sense. So maybe they will announce it at the end of the season.
Possibly, I think, and totally right. In an ideal world, you don't want any disruption once the season started. As a manager and as players, certainly not throughout the season. But for me at the moment, I see it as a continuation of the feel-good factor around the club at the moment, because they're getting positive results, certainly in the league. The players are playing with a lot of confidence. I think if this takeover was to happen as well, it would give everyone involved in the club, and the most important people, the fans, who unfortunately cannot get to see these good performances at the moment in terms of being in the stadium. They can on the TV, but it would just continue the feel-good factor around the place for me, and I think it'd be brilliant, really. I just think it could help the club kick on again. And what it will do as well, Steve, is because the team are playing with such confidence and are hopefully moving up the table. That's what we've talked about from day one. It helps you attract better players as well, because they'll see that, okay, Newcastle's a club on the move, on the way up, and they're playing well. They've got some good players already there. And if they can add more good players to it, there's that potential, to be challenging at the right end of the table again.
Yeah. Former player Chris Waddle came out this week and heaped praise, I think, on Andy Carroll. Obviously signed his new contract. Was spoken about him. Would he sign? Wouldn't he sign? Did we think it was a good idea? Well, he's obviously signed that extension now. But Waddle said that he still feels he can play a major part at Newcastle, and all he's really lacking is a supporting striker. He obviously needs that little bit of luck with injuries, but Andy will be happy that he's staying for another year.
Listen, he loves the club. He was desperate for the move to come back. I've known him many years. Obviously brought him through in the reserves. He's got a great love for the club. The only thing Andy needs, and we've said it many, many times, is to stay injury-free. You've got a hell of a number 9 in terms of an attacking threat of his type. The best. I've never seen anyone like him in the rest of Europe in terms of how effective he can be. And you're right, he can, you get the right player alongside him, or if he plays as that number 1 striker in the 4-2-3-1 system, but you have those 3 rapid lads behind him, St. Maxim, Almiron, Lazaro, who can go past people and play at speed. They can make runs beyond Andy when he's heading those balls down and he's laying things off. It could be fantastic. There's only the one question mark, and that's the fitness issues. If there's some way they can get round that, get him in like some sort of fitness regime over a long period. So this little short, that the period they're going to have between the end of this season and the start of the new one, really get into him to try and manage his training, so he's available every game to start, not just bits and bobs. And so I think over the course of this season, he's probably picked up 4 separate different injuries, and that's the only downside, Steve. He's. There's no doubt in his ability. There's no doubt in what he can bring to the team, and I can imagine as well. He's a real big influence in the dressing room as well, because he is vocal. He demands a lot of his teammates, and he's obviously a local lad, so he'll be pushing, what the club means to everybody, and he'll be a great, type of player that Steve will want in his dressing room. Steve Bruce, to get Steve's messages across. He seems to have a good relationship with Steve, seems very loyal to what Steve's beliefs are. So he'll be the link between the management team and the dressing room, I would have thought.
There was a report in the Guardian this week, again, another Premier League report, about the potential of allowing fans to return next season, the start of next season. But it's good news in one way, but bad news in another, because they're talking about only having the grounds half full. Obviously, the social distancing is now coming down from 2 meters to 1 meter. And although it's not been confirmed that that's what they're going to do, what would you make of that if, we could only have, 26,000 at St. James's Park? And, how would the club decide on who goes?
Exactly. You've got that would create so many problems, I think, for the bigger clubs. How do you manage that? How do you pick, as you say, the 26,000 who are allowed in? How do you, what's the criteria for that? Are you, because you're going to be leaving. There'll be people who've been to probably most home and away games who aren't going to be in part of that lucky 26,000 who get into the ground. And it's St. James's is one of those grounds as well, Stephen. You've probably witnessed it when you've watched the early rounds of the FA Cup or the League Cup, and the ground hasn't been as full as you expect. And it's not the same, is it? It looks a bit bare because it's such a big stadium, and if it's, even though there could be 30,000 in there, it still looks a bit strange, And I'm not sure. I think probably the safest way would be just to wait until you can fill it, until you can get all your fans in. I think they'd rather have it that way. I think it's going to be a difficult one just to have a certain number. and you're gonna get a lot of people who are disappointed, and there'll be, you know, negativity against the club on why they haven't been allowed and why they're not part of the 26,000. So for certainly I can understand lower down, because those type of clubs they live by that income from that gate money, you know. When I've managed some of those lower league clubs, the gate money is what keeps the club moving. It pays the wages, whatever, etc., etc. A lot of the Premier League clubs have a lot of you know, slush funds where, you know, that's not the case. I mean, I'm not saying that they can't do without the fans. They do need them back, but it's not as if it's keeping the business afloat, keeping the club afloat, which many clubs lower down the pyramid, and certainly in the Football League, they rely on the gate money. So I think that the lower league clubs, they'd be desperate to get any sort of crowd into their stadiums, just so they can get some income coming in, and they can run as a normal business again.
I mean, we're getting back to the team. Steve Bruce, you know, I had doubts about Steve Bruce coming in as manager. I've never directly criticised him. I've backed him, but you know, for me, he wasn't my first choice as a manager, as was the case with a lot of fans. But this week, obviously, you know, we cemented our place in the Premier League. I put something on Instagram. I know you saw it. Just, you know, congratulating him on a great job. And obviously he's been interviewed about that this week, saying that, you know, he was aware of the, you know, the doubters and people weren't happy. But he's paid a lot of respect to the dressing room and the players, which I thought was quite admirable. He was saying that people underestimated the team spirit in the dressing room, because when you write the manager off, I suppose you write the players off. And, you know, he just said that, you know, he paid his respects to the players, and fair play to him that they rose to the occasion and that they haven't let him down.
Absolutely. Listen, and I think Steve was under no illusions. He wasn't the number one choice, possibly the number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 choice of most fans. But as I've said to you many times, and we've obviously communicated this is Steve's dream job. He's a Geordie lad. Anyone who's been in management and is a Geordie lad to get offered the Newcastle United job would take it under any circumstances, because you don't know when that job, if it's going to ever be offered to you again. And I know Steve, from being close to him, he did regret when he turned the job down, you know, earlier in his career. And that was his big regret. And it was something that, you know, bugged him, obviously, till the time he got the opportunity. And he would have known, and he's an experienced guy, he would have known that he was under the cost straight away. You know, as a manager, when you go into a club, you usually get a honeymoon period. Steve didn't have that. He didn't have that. And, you know, there was this stuff that he was going to be, you know, Mike Ashley's puppet, this, that and the other, like, you know, certain other managers had been previously before. I think probably out of most of Mike's appointment, probably only Rafa and Kevin were the only two who stood up to Mike and done it their way, really, and demanded to do it their way. Obviously, Kevin felt he couldn't take it any further, so walked out, and Rafa didn't want to sign a new contract. He stayed loyal to his current deal, but when that ran out, you know, felt that it wasn't for him where he wanted to be and what he was used to doing in terms of football clubs. And I think Steve has just took the job in terms of it being his dream job, but nowhere being a supporter of Mike or whatever, or how Mike ran his football club. And he's used his man management skills to get the players on board. You know, because the players had a lot of respect for Rafa. They looked like you know, he had them very well drilled and organised. And sometimes when a new man comes in, if you lose that faith in the players, it can go against you. But I think what Steve's done, he's put his own mark on the group. And I think because of his personality as well, the players have enjoyed playing for him. And it's been it is credit to the players. I've said it for many years. I've said that this group of players who've been around for the last 3 or 4 years, no one can ever question that commitment and attitude and desire to the club and to the shirt. They give absolutely everything. I do think that there's a limit in terms of the squad if they want help to get to the top end of the league. But I think those players want that. They want better players coming in. They want help. They want to be involved in a team that's competing for Europe, possibly, challenging to win cups. And they'll be desperate that, there's potentially some big name signings could be on the way if the takeover happens. I do think it's a terrific group of players. I don't think he never feels shortchanged by, you always talk about the support that all he expects and demands is 100%. I think those Newcastle players, you can count on one hand when they haven't delivered that. They just need a bit of help with the quality. And I think Steve's took on the baton well from Rafa. Great news that he got, proposed as manager of the month for June, alongside St. Maxim as player of the month. It's great. That's great kudos for the football club. It's great that your manager and your star player are getting recognised. So, as I said, it's a real feel-good factor at the moment, and hopefully it can continue.
Yeah. Looking ahead to today's game, West Ham, obviously 2:15 kick-off today. The latest in a long line of catch-up games since Project Restart came in. And the team news, obviously, will be out an hour before kick-off, but still no Florian Lejeune, still no Kieran Clark. Doubts over Sean Longstaff today, Joe Linton and Jamal Lascelles. Matt Ritchie was fit enough, obviously, to be named on the bench at Bournemouth in midweek. Atu still struggling to get in the squad. But Bruce, you think he'll make some changes today, won't he? Because, the players have had a lot of games after such a long layoff. And he's got a squad. He's going to use it, isn't he?
He's got to, Steve. And unfortunately, it's a risk for a manager because you change. You don't really want to change a winning team and a team who played so well. But the fatigue element means that you'll have to. The injuries, obviously, Sean had to go off very early in the game in midweek. So he would be extremely doubtful, I would have thought. And as you say, there's the doubt about the captain, Lascelles and Lejeune and Clark are long-term injuries. Whether they'll play any part in the remaining part of the season, I don't think Clark will. Lejeune, I'm not too sure about. It just means to give you fresh legs, fresh impetus. I think what he learned after the Villa game, when he named an unchanged team from the previous game, was probably because the games are in very quick succession, you're probably not going to get away with it. You're not going to get the same level of energy levels and intensity from your team. And it is important to give the lads who probably didn't start on Wednesday, some of those, get some fresh legs in important areas. And you're absolutely 100%. I think it goes for every club playing the Premier League at this moment, is that you have to use all your players that are available to you, because it's playing competitive matches in a type of pre-season environment, really, because they're coming thick and fast, and the players have obviously had a long period of time off, but you can see they're getting back in tune with the way the games are going. But you do need the freshness in your team, and hopefully the lads that get brought in, they'll perform as well. And then the manager's got a serious selection headache then, in terms of if all the players are performing, the ones he brings in who didn't start the last game, it means that he's got issues in who he picks for the next game. And hopefully that's the case, because it means that the lads who come in today produce a performance and get a result again.
We've got a Facebook page these days, NUFC Matters Facebook. We stuck a poll up about an hour ago. Newcastle, West Ham predictions for the game. 120 people think Newcastle's going to win. 11 people have gone for the draw, and only 2 people think West Ham will win. So major confidence amongst the support at the minute, and rightly so.
Got to be, Steve. I think one of the informed teams at the moment, and I said it, early in the lockdown, I've seen a lot of games. I mean, I watched it again yesterday. The Leicester Palace game for over an hour was a very dull type of game. It got sparked into life, with Vardy's couple of goals, for him getting into the 100 barrier, then breaking that. But before that, it'd been quite dull. But whereas, I don't know if I'm looking through black and white eyes, but Newcastle have been involved in some exciting games, scored some terrific goals, and the momentum and the excitement and the positivity around the city, you can sense it. You can sense that people are enjoying the team. And if you remember, before the games come back, me and you talked, and we talked about some players might get a new lease of life, not playing in front of fans. They're not players who hadn't been playing with a lot of confidence before. That they're not getting criticised if they make a bad pass. They're not getting criticised if they miss an opportunity, and they play with a lot more confidence. And I think you can see 1 or 2 players certainly doing that. And what I hope will happen is this little period when there's no fans in there, those players look like they're playing with, on a full tilt of confidence. They keep that confidence levels when the fans come back in, and the fans will see completely transformed players. That's what I've recognised, certainly. Some of the performance of individuals has been like a breath of fresh air. We scored 4 at Bournemouth, but we could have scored 6 or 7. And the quality of all the goals were exceptional the other day. So that's what I'm hoping can continue,
Good to see Dwight Gayle getting back among the goals as well. I mean, he's a player who, he's often been criticised at Premiership level. A lot of people saying he's a Championship player, but he's found the goal scoring touch again, hasn't he?
Listen, he is a goal scorer, and he has found it difficult in the Premier League. And why I say he's a goal scorer, and I give an example, that chance he missed against Manchester City, but he goes back within a couple of minutes and he gets a chance against Bournemouth. Now, if that's, say, not a natural goal scorer who has that instinct, say a midfield player like myself, you miss a chance like that, what you usually find is you lose a little bit of confidence, and do you get back in that position to miss the next chance? Where Dwight Gayle did, he puts himself in those positions to miss those chances. And, the top strikers I played with and they've played for the club, we've seen them miss, what you'd call easy chances for them. But what they do is they have this different mentality. It doesn't affect them one iota. It doesn't affect their confidence. It doesn't affect their mentality. They get back in the same position again to miss the next chance or even score it. It doesn't worry them. Whereas other players who aren't natural goal scorers, when they miss a chance like that, it'll prey on their mind for a while. And, but natural goal scorers, it doesn't worry. They know if you're going to be a top goal scorer, you're going to be missing chances as well, because you're putting yourself in the position to miss those chances. What you worry about as a manager is if you've got a striker who doesn't get in those positions, that's when you really worry about your attacking players. If they're missing, and if they're not even getting there. And that's what happened with Joe Linton for a spell when he went through a poor run. He stopped actually getting in positions to miss the chances. He wasn't even getting chances because what he'd done, his confidence had took such a battering. He wasn't putting himself in the middle of the 6-yard box for crosses. He wasn't getting on the rebounds from a goalkeeping save or something like that. You could see he was worried about chances coming to him. Dwight Gayle wasn't. It was an absolute sit I missed against City. But within 5 minutes of Bournemouth, he's back in a position and he finished it terrific. And for me, he's just got to, if he can get a run of games and get a run of games where he can score on a regular basis and get this belief in him and the people around him that he can be a goal scorer in the Premier League, because he's got an unbelievable record outside of the Premier League. It just, when he gets here, he doesn't get many goals or as many goals as he gets lower down. But I'm of the mindset that goal scorers are goal scorers. If you make chances for them in any level, they'll finish more than the miss. So I think, hopefully that will be the case with Dwight, because he has got a terrific attitude as well. He works extremely hard for the team.
Yeah, 100%. I'd agree. Yeah, just hope he gets a few more before the end of the season. Before we get your prediction for today's game, Lee, you've been in the headlines, the NUFC headlines this week. 2 ex-players who were interviewed, both had cracking stories about you. Mirandina, we had Mirandina on, and he was telling us you were very good as his boot boy. He spoke highly of you as a player, but he says you were his boot boy, and it was good. And he said he was talking about when he was last over, and obviously we came up to your house, we had a lovely meal up there, and he was just speaking very fondly of you. You've got some great memories of Mirror.
Absolutely love the guy. I mean, I was just a young player and I was still a supporter, and it was still my dream to play for the club. And here we are signing this Brazilian who scored a terrific goal at Wembley against England just a couple of weeks previous. And as you say, him and Paul Gascoigne hit it off. I mean, what an unlikely relationship that was. I'm not sure who advised and picked Paul to be Mirror's interpreter, but it went a little bit wayward at times, I've got to say. What Paul was telling him was English, wasn't quite true at times. So some of the things Mirror would reply to it when we asked him a question wasn't the response we were normally expecting from those type of questions, and not something I can repeat on this show, that's for sure. But what a terrific fella. As you say, he was over, was it about a couple of years ago? And you brought him across to my house, and such an honour for me to have him across for dinner. We had a great night. You can remember, I introduced him to my kids. Obviously, you know, they're Newcastle fans, but Mirror was before their time, and it was just great to have him about, and brilliant. Just like, it was like he, he hadn't been away. Here's another guy who comes from the other side of the world and just adores the football club.
Yeah.
And adores the people. Didn't think twice. I know you had him over doing some hospitality work and stuff like that, and entertainment work, and for him to come over from the other side of the world and to do that again, and he speaks so highly of the football club. And when you speak about the boots, if you remember that evening when our old mate Alan Thompson came and we'd had one too many glasses of vino, and he tried to tell Mirror what type of boots he'd worn, and he was adamant there were one type of make, and Mirror was adamant there was the other. That was one of the funniest conversations I've ever witnessed in my life, to be honest. Alan Thompson and Mirandinha talking about what boots he wore.
Classic. Now, yesterday I interviewed Darren Jackson, which people can watch on the channel, and it was a cracking interview. I met up with Darren at the start of the season, actually, when he was guest to Paul Watson on the ex-players table, and it was great to see him, great to meet up with him, and he was a cracking player back in the day, but he told a cracking story off camera, and I wish I'd got it on camera, because he said him and Gazza were pulling into the car park at St James's Park when the ticket office used to be at the top end of the ground, at the Leazes end of the ground on the right hand side when he used to come through.
Yeah.
And he told me this. Now, is this true? He said Gazza seen you as they were coming in, and he pointed at Darren. He says, "See that kid up there?" He says, "He's going to be training with he's going to start training with the first team." And he says, "It was you." And he says, "You just peeked out the window. You seen Gazza, and you said, you pointed at yourself like that, and you went, 'I'm number one. I'm going to..."
I was a cocky little git. I was. I probably did. I think I used to say something like, "Fat boy, I'm after your place." I remember that old, what you say, the old ticket office, the manager's office used to be upstairs there. And Joe Harvey was head of recruitment at the time, the late great Joe Harvey. And I obviously got to know Joe when I was a young schoolboy signing my contract. So when I came to sign it, Willie McFall was manager, and I came into the little reception area, if you remember there, that was in that office block. And Paul Gazza was there. And I was going up the stairs with my mum and dad to do like a photo shoot and sign the contract. And Gazza's exact words were, I'll not use the swear words he put in the sentence, but was, "Take them for every penny you can, lad." I was only 14 at the time.
Brilliant stuff, man. Some great memories.
It was, I bet you Darren never tell you this one. We had a coach called John Pickering, brilliant guy, great coach at the time, terrific coach. And Darren Jackson and Michael O'Neill used to argue with each other for fun on the training pitch, just all the time, absolutely at each other's throats, just moaning, groaning at each other. So John Pickering one day got sick of it, and he stopped the training session, and he got all to go in my cars, and he took me to, I think it was Benwell Boxing Club or something, and he gave Darren and Michael a pair of gloves and put them in the ring and let them punch 7 bells out of each other. And we're all cheering on round the ring, and then he said at the end of it, "Right, that's it, we're done, you two stop moaning."
Brilliant.
Back onto the training pitch. Old school stuff, Great.
Who got the better?
But Darren, as you said, Darren, there were two featherweights. You seen the size of the two of them then, Darren and Michael. They looked like they'd never had a meal in their life. I mean, because Darren was, as you said, a great signing for the club, because I think he came from somewhere up in Scotland. It was a lower league club, wasn't it?
It was part-time, he came from part-time football.
Yeah, and he for a nominal fee, but he during that era when he played, and he done really well for the club. And obviously when I was working up in Scotland, I seen quite a bit of him as well, So yeah, good times, good lads. Paul's always involved in them. Like, there's never a dull story when you talk about Paul Gascoigne in whenever you've met him.
Definitely not. Okay, Lee, before we finish, give us a prediction for the day, mate.
We're going to continue the high scoring. I'm going to say 3-0.
Great stuff, mate.
3-0, and I'm not bothered who scores, so I won't give you goal scorers, but I'm going to think the feel-good factor is going to continue. West Ham, I think that players will think they've done the hard work because I had that impressive win v Chelsea, so they'll not be at it and we'll make them pay.
Brilliant stuff, mate. As always, absolute pleasure to speak to you, and I'll catch up with you next Saturday to look back on the Man City midweek and look ahead to the game next Saturday.
All right, Steve. All the best.
Take care, pal.